Commander Zithiska adjusted her neural interface as the readings continued to baffle her scientific team. The massive vessel floating dead in space defied every known principle of galactic civilization. No energy signatures, no life support systems running, no distress beacons. Yet somehow, impossibly, there were life forms aboard. Scan results are inconsistent, Commander, reported her chief science officer, Vex Prime. His crystalline features flickered with confusion as data streams flowed across his cortical display. The ship appears to be constructed from primitive materials, metals, ceramics, some form of polymer composites. Nothing that should survive deep space travel. Zithiska's mandibles clicked in frustration. In her 3 centuries of service with the Galactic Consortium, she had encountered 17 different sentient species, each more advanced than the last. The pattern was always the same: energy-based propulsion, bioneural ship consciousness, quantum communication arrays. This vessel before them looked like something cobbled together from scrap metal. "What about the life forms?" she asked. "That's where it becomes truly bizarre," Vex Prime replied, his internal lights pulsing rapidly with excitement. "Preliminary scans indicate carbon-based biology, but the readings are chaotic, unstable, as if their entire biological matrix is in constant flux." Through the viewport of her flagship, the Eternal Wisdom, Zithiska studied the alien craft. It was massive but crude, covered in what appeared to be patches and repairs. Sections of the hull showed different metallurgy, as if the entire vessel had been built from salvaged parts over many cycles. Most disturbing of all, it was moving through space without any visible means of propulsion. "Commander," interrupted her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission. It's audio only." Zithiska's eye stalks swiveled in surprise. Audio transmission? What primitive species still relied on sound waves for communication? The consortium had moved beyond such crude methods millennia ago, when they discovered direct neural interfacing. "Put it through the universal translator and play it," she ordered. Static filled the bridge, followed by a voice that was rough, organic, and strangely melodic. The universal translator worked frantically to decode the alien language. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Resilience. We're experiencing life support failures and have wounded aboard. We're not asking for much, just some spare parts if you can manage it, maybe some medical supplies. We understand if you can't help. Thanks for listening." The bridge fell silent. Zithiska's mandibles froze mid-click. In all her centuries of first contact protocols, she had never encountered anything like this. Species typically opened communications with either aggressive posturing, formal diplomatic protocols, or technological demonstrations of superiority. They didn't ask for help. "Commander," whispered her tactical officer, "this could be a trap. A primitive species wouldn't survive in this sector of space. The Vrex migration routes pass through here. Any vessel will be torn apart by their feeding swarms." Zithiska considered this. The Vrex were one of the most feared species in the galaxy, energy-based predators that consumed the life force of entire star systems. This region of space was considered a dead zone, avoided by all civilized species. Yet here was this impossible vessel, somehow intact. "Scan their ship more thoroughly," she commanded. "I want to know everything about their capabilities." As her crew worked, Zithiska found herself studying the transmission logs. The voice, this Captain Chun, had spoken with a tone she couldn't quite identify. There was fatigue, yes, and concerned, but underneath it was something else. Something that made her nervous in ways she couldn't explain. "Commander, the scan results are..." Vex Prime's lights flickered in a pattern she had never seen before. "I'm not sure how to report this." "Try." Their ship is held together with what can only be described as creative engineering. Sections that should have failed cycles ago are somehow functional. Their power source appears to be controlled fusion, a technology so primitive we stopped using it before the first galactic age. "But Commander..." He paused, his crystalline form shimmering. "They've modified it in ways that should be impossible." Zithiska's curiosity was now fully engaged. "Explain." "They've somehow managed to create a stable fusion reaction using materials that shouldn't be able to contain such forces. Their magnetic containment fields are generated by what appears to be wiring. Actual physical conduits carrying electrical current. It's like watching someone perform surgery with stone tools." Another voice crackled through the communicator, different from the first, but equally organic. "Captain, we're showing another ship on sensors. It's big, really big. The first voice, Captain Chun, responded immediately. Open channel. Maybe they heard our message. Zithiska found herself impressed despite her confusion. Most species, when encountering a vastly superior vessel, either fled immediately or began transmitting surrender codes. These humans seemed merely curious. This is Captain Chun again. We see you there. Thank you for stopping. We're not in immediate danger, but we could really use some help with our oxygen recyclers if you have compatible systems. We're also carrying injured crew from a transport vessel we found drifting. We managed to save most of them, but our medical bay is pretty basic. The communications officer looked up at Zithiska with obvious confusion. Commander, they're telling us about injured crew from another species? Play back that section. The transmission repeated, and Zithiska heard it clearly. These humans had encountered another vessel in distress and had taken survivors aboard their own failing ship. In a region of space where the strong devoured the weak, where even the most advanced species traveled in heavily armed fleets, these primitives had stopped to help strangers. Commander, her tactical officer reported, I'm detecting multiple life sign varieties aboard their vessel. The universal scanner is having difficulty cataloging them, but there appear to be at least 4 different species aboard. Zithiska's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed this information. For species aboard a single vessel, the galactic norm was strict species segregation. Different evolutionary paths led to incompatible societies, incompatible technologies, incompatible biologies. Mixing species led inevitably to conflict, disease, and chaos. Every civilized being knew this. What's the condition of their ship? She asked. Failing on multiple levels, Vex Prime reported. Hull breaches sealed with what appears to be metallic patches welded from the inside. Atmospheric leaks being temporarily contained by some form of polymer sealant. Their fusion reactor is operating at dangerous efficiency levels. Any minor fluctuation should cause a catastrophic explosion. Commander, by all known physics, that ship should have destroyed itself long ago. Their reactor is running configurations that violate basic principles of containment theory. Their life support is jury-rigged with components from at least 6 different technological paradigms. Their hull integrity should have failed under the stress of deep space travel. Zithiska found herself facing a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her very long life. Standard consortium protocol was clear. Unknown species were to be observed, cataloged, and reported to the Central Authority. Direct intervention was forbidden until proper cultural assessment could be completed, a process that typically took several galactic cycles. But something about that voice, about the casual way these humans had asked for help while simultaneously helping others, made standard protocol feel inadequate. Captain Chun, this is Commander Zithiska of the consortium vessel Eternal Wisdom. We have received your transmission. There was a pause, then excited voices in the background of the human ship. Captain Chen's voice returned, and Zithiska could hear what the translator interpreted as relief. Commander Zithiska, this is incredibly good news. We weren't sure anyone would be out this way. We're grateful for any assistance you might be able to provide. Captain Chun, our sensors indicate your vessel should not be capable of surviving in this region of space. How did you arrive here? Another pause, then something that sounded like laughter. Well, Commander, that's a bit of a story. We were following a distress signal, the transport ship I mentioned. Our navigation systems aren't exactly state-of-the-art, and we may have taken a wrong turn somewhere along the way. Zithiska's eye stalks swiveled in disbelief. You entered this sector by accident, more or less. But we found the people we were looking for, so I'd call it a successful mission overall. A successful mission. These beings had accidentally wandered into one of the most dangerous regions of known space, found a ship full of alien survivors, taken them aboard their failing vessel, and considered it a success. Commander, her science officer interrupted privately, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Vrex swarm patterns. We have perhaps 6 standard time units before they reach this position. The Vrex. Zithiska felt her respiratory systems accelerate. Even her advanced vessel would have difficulty surviving a Vrex feeding swarm. The humans, with their primitive ship and impossible engineering, would be consumed in moments. Captain Chun, she said urgently, you need to leave this system immediately. There are dangerous predators approaching. Understood, Commander. We're working on getting our engines back online. In the meantime, Is there any chance you could spare some medical supplies? We've got some people in pretty rough shape over here. Even facing imminent death, they were still concerned about their rescued passengers. Zithiska made her decision. Prepare emergency transport for medical supplies and technical assistance, she ordered her crew. And ready to ship for immediate departure. Commander, consortium protocols clearly state, I'm aware of the protocols. Zithiska cut off her first officer. I'm also aware that we're about to witness the extinction of a species that risks their lives to help strangers. Prepare the transport. As her crew scrambled to comply, Zithiska opened the communication channel again. Captain Shun, we're sending over supplies and technical assistance. However, you need to understand, this system will be overrun by hostile forces within the standard time unit. You need to evacuate immediately. Copy that, Commander. And thank you. Really, this means more than you know. Through her viewport, Zithiska watched the small transport shuttle approach the human vessel. The size difference was staggering. Her shuttle was nearly as large as their entire ship. Yet somehow, that crude vessel had carried multiple species across impossible distances through deadly space. Commander, reported her pilot, the human vessel it's beautiful. Zithiska's mandibles clicked in confusion. Explain. The repairs, Commander. They're not just functional, they're artistic. Each patch tells a story. Each modification shows not just technical skill, but creativity. It's like looking at a living testament to survival and cooperation. As the transport docked with the human ship, Zithiska found herself studying the vessel with new eyes. What she had initially dismissed as primitive now revealed itself as something far more complex. This was not a ship built by a single species using standardized technology. This was a vessel that had been constantly modified, adapted, and improved by different minds working together. Commander, our team is aboard their vessel, reported the transport pilot. You're not going to believe what we're seeing here. Report. Sir, they've taken the survivors from 6 different species that shouldn't be able to coexist in the same atmosphere. And they've created individual habitat zones within their ship. They've jury-rigged life support systems for biochemistries we've never seen before. And, sir, they're not just keeping these beings alive. They're treating them as equals. Zithiska felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. Elaborate. The rescued species aren't cargo or prisoners, Commander. They're crew members. They're working together to keep this ship functional. I'm watching a methane-breathing entity collaborate with an oxygen breather on engine modifications. It should be impossible. Through the communication link, she could hear the bustle of activity aboard the human vessel. Different voices, different languages being translated in real time, all working toward the same goal, survival and mutual aid. Commander, her tactical officer called out urgently. Vrek's energy signatures are intensifying. They'll be in weapons range in 4 time units. Zithiska made another decision that would change everything. Captain Shun, our scans indicate your vessel cannot escape this system before the hostiles arrive. We're prepared to extend our defensive shields to cover your ship, but you'll need to maintain close formation with us. There was a longer pause this time, then Captain Chen's voice returned with a tone Zithiska was beginning to recognize as typically human, grateful, but not subservient. Commander, we appreciate the offer, but we won't put your ship at risk for our sake. We've been in tight spots before. If you need to go. We'll figure something out. The bridge of the eternal wisdom fell silent. In all of galactic history, no species had ever declined protection from a superior force out of concern for their protector's safety. The concept was so alien that Zithiska's neural pathways struggled to process it. Captain Shun, she said carefully, our vessel is significantly more advanced than yours. We are in no danger from this threat. That's good to hear, Commander. But if there's any risk to your crew, we can't accept your help. That's not how we do things. Zithiska felt something crack inside her understanding of civilization itself. These beings, these impossible, primitive, chaotic beings, operated by rules that made no logical sense, yet seemed somehow profoundly right. Commander, her science officer reported, the human vessel is powering up their engines. They're actually going to try to outrun a Vrek's swarm in that ship. Through the viewport, Zithiska watched the human ship begin to move. Its engines, crude fusion drives that should have failed long ago, came online with efficiency ratings that defied physics. The vessel accelerated at velocities that should have torn its patchwork hull apart. but it held together. Just like everything else about these humans, it held together through sheer impossible determination. All ships, follow the human vessel, Ska ordered. We're going to see how this story ends. As the two ships moved through space, Ska realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. She was watching a species that had somehow turned weakness into strength, chaos into harmony, and primitive technology into something approaching magic. And she had the distinct feeling that offering kindness to these humans was going to change everything she thought she knew about civilization, survival, and what it meant to be truly advanced. The Vreks were coming, but for the first time in her long career, Ska found herself curious rather than afraid. These humans had already proven that impossible things could happen when different species worked together with genuine care for each other's welfare. Perhaps they were about to prove something even more extraordinary. The space around them erupted into chaos as the Vreks swarm materialized from hyperspace. Ska had seen Vreks attacks before. They were swift, brutal, and absolute. Energy beings that fed on life force itself. They moved through space like a living storm, consuming everything in their path. But what happened next would be recorded in galactic archives as the impossible engagement. "Commander," her tactical officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief, "the human vessel is not retreating." Through the viewport, Ska watched the crude Earth ship turn to face the approaching swarm. Its patchwork hull seemed to shimmer as power flowed to systems that shouldn't exist. "Captain Chun," she transmitted urgently, "you must retreat immediately. Vreks cannot be fought with conventional weapons." The response came back calm and steady. "Commander, we've got people aboard who can't move as fast as your ship. We're not leaving them behind." Besides, there was a pause, followed by sounds of activity in the background. "We got a few ideas." Ideas. Against the Vreks. Ska's mandibles clicked in patterns her species, reserved for witnessing the impossible. "Commander," Vex Prime called out, his crystalline form pulsing with rapid calculations, "the human vessel is redirecting power in configurations I've never seen before. They're channeling their fusion output through." "Commander," they're using their hull as a giant antenna. On the tactical display, the human ship began to glow with energy that made no sense according to known physics. The fusion reactor that should have exploded was somehow converting its entire output into a coherent energy field that surrounded the vessel like a second skin. The first wave of Vreks hit the human ship and simply stopped. The energy beings, accustomed to draining life force from their targets, encountered something they had never faced before, a life force that fought back. The human ship's energy field didn't just resist the Vreks' feeding. It actively repelled them, sending the energy predators tumbling through space like leaves in a storm. "That's impossible," whispered her tactical officer. "Vreks are pure energy. Nothing physical can affect them." "Commander," came Captain Shin's voice through the communication link, "we're reading massive energy signatures from your position. Are you under attack?" "Under attack." The humans had just accomplished something that violated every known law of physics and xenobiology, and they were asking if their allies needed help. "Captain Shun, how did you repel the Vreks?" Ska demanded. "Oh, that." The casual tone in Chen's voice suggested she was discussing ship maintenance rather than rewriting the fundamental rules of space combat. "One of our passengers, Crix Theta from the Melodic Collective, suggested that since the Vreks feed on life energy, we could create a feedback loop using our ship's bioelectric field enhanced through the fusion matrix. Turns out when you've got 6 different species working together, you get some pretty unique electromagnetic signatures." Ska felt her worldview cracking further. The Melodic Collective was a species of pure thought, beings of living music who existed in frequencies most species couldn't even detect. They were also notoriously reclusive and had never been known to cooperate with other species. "You have a member of the Melodic Collective aboard your vessel?" "Crix Theta and their choir pod, yes. We picked them up 3 cycles ago when their harmonic vessel was damaged by a solar flare. They've been helping us tune our engine frequencies. Amazing what you can accomplish when everyone contributes their strengths." Through her tactical displays, Ska watched the Vreks swarm regroup for another attack. But something was wrong with their formation patterns. Energy beings that typically moved with perfect coordination were now scattered and confused. Vex Prime analyzed the Vreks' behavioral patterns. Her science officer's lights flickered rapidly as he processed data. Commander, the Vrex appear to be disoriented. Their feeding instincts are telling them there's life energy here, but every time they attempt to feed, they encounter resistance frequencies that cause neural feedback in their energy matrices. Neural feedback? Commander, I believe the human vessel has created the first known Vrex confusion weapon. By combining multiple species' bioelectric signatures and amplifying them through their fusion system, they've created an energy field that actually causes the Vrex to become nauseous. Nauseous Vrex. Zethus filed that under concepts that should not exist in reality. The second Vrex attack wave struck, but this time they approached more cautiously. The human ship's energy field had stabilized into something that registered on sensors as both familiar and completely alien. Life energy signatures from 6 different evolutionary paths, somehow woven together into a single defensive matrix. Commander, her communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the Vrex swarm leader. This was unprecedented. Vrex were predators, not diplomats. They didn't communicate, they simply fed. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the translator was unlike anything in Zethus experience. Pure energy converted to sound, like listening to lightning speak. Unknown life forms. Your energy patterns are unpleasant. We cannot feed here. How do you create such wrongness? Before Zethus could respond, another voice came through the communication link, Captain Chun, apparently monitoring all frequencies. This is Captain Chun of the Earth Vessel Resilience. We're not trying to be unpleasant. We're just trying to survive and help our friends do the same. Is there something we can do to resolve this peacefully? Peacefully. The human was attempting to negotiate with a species of energy vampires. And somehow, impossibly, it seemed to be working. The Vrex leader's response came after a long pause. Your friends. Multiple life patterns in single vessel. This is not known to us. Why do you not consume the weaker ones? Why would we do that? Chen's voice carried genuine puzzlement. They're our crew. We take care of each other. Another pause, longer this time. When the Vrex leader spoke again, there was something in its voice that Zethus translator struggled to interpret. Curiosity? Confusion? We do not understand. Life energy exists to be consumed. The strong feed upon the weak. This is the way of all existence. Well, Chen replied thoughtfully, that's one way to look at it. But we found that when you help others become stronger, everyone benefits. More ideas, more solutions to problems, more ways to survive difficult situations. You make the weak strong. We help each other become the best versions of ourselves. That's kind of the whole point of civilization, isn't it? Zethus realized she was witnessing something that would be studied by xenosociologists for millennia to come, a philosophical debate between a species of predatory energy beings and a group of primitives who had somehow convinced 6 different species to work together as equals. Commander, Vex Prime reported urgently. The Vrex swarm is changing formation. They're withdrawing. Through the viewport, Zethus watched the impossible sight of a Vrex swarm pulling back from potential prey. But they weren't leaving the system. Instead, they formed a loose perimeter around the 2 ships, maintaining distance but clearly remaining to observe. The Vrex leader's voice returned, now filled with something that could only be described as scientific interest. Show us. Show us how weak becomes strong. Captain Chen's response was immediate. Commander Zethus, would you be willing to participate in a joint demonstration? I think our new friends here might benefit from seeing how cooperation works. Our new friends. Zethus neural pathways nearly overloaded processing that statement. The humans had just convinced a swarm of energy predators to become curious about cooperation rather than consumption. Captain Chun, what exactly do you propose? Well, we still got some pretty serious system failures aboard our ship. Your technology is obviously far more advanced than ours. But we've got some unusual solutions that might interest your science teams. Maybe we could work together on repairs and see what happens when different approaches combine. Zethus found herself faced with another decision that defied all protocol. Standard procedure when encountering both unknown species and Vrex was to retreat immediately and file reports. Instead, she was being invited to participate in an impromptu scientific collaboration under the observation of energy beings who should have been trying to consume them all. Vex Prime, what's your assessment of this situation? Her science officer's lights created patterns she had never seen before. Commander, from a purely scientific standpoint, This represents the greatest research opportunity in galactic history. We have the chance to study cooperative xenobiology, impossible engineering solutions, and Vrex behavioral adaptation all simultaneously. And from a survival standpoint, Commander, I believe we are statistically safer participating in this cooperation than we would be attempting to flee. The humans have somehow neutralized the Vrex threat through methods we don't understand. If we leave now, we may lose the opportunity to learn those methods. Zithiska made her decision. Captain Shun, we accept your proposal. Prepare to receive technical teams. What followed was the most chaotic and productive 6 standard time units of Zithiska's career. Her engineering teams, trained in precise methodology and standardized procedures, found themselves working alongside beings who approached problems from angles that seemed to violate logic itself. The human engineer, a cheerful woman named Rodriguez, collaborated with Zithiska's chief engineer on power distribution problems by suggesting they just try stuff and see what works. The methodical precision of consortium engineering met human intuition and improvisation, and somehow produced solutions that were both more effective and more elegant than either approach alone. Meanwhile, the rescued passengers on the human vessel proved to be a treasure trove of exotic knowledge. The melodic collective member helped optimize energy frequencies in ways that made both ships more efficient. A silicon-based life form shared crystalline growth techniques that improved hull integrity. A quantum phase being offered insights into dimensional stability that revolutionized their understanding of space travel. But perhaps most remarkably, the Vrex had moved closer to observe these activities. Energy beings who had never shown interest in anything beyond feeding were now actively studying the cooperative work taking place between the vessels. Commander, her communications officer reported, the Vrex leader is requesting permission to participate. Participate? A species of energy vampires wanted to help with engineering problems. Captain Chun, Zithiska transmitted, the Vrex are requesting to join our collaboration. That's fantastic. Chen's enthusiasm was unmistakable. What kind of energy manipulation capabilities do they have? What kind of energy manipulation capabilities? As if inviting apex predators to join a repair project was a perfectly normal occurrence. The Vrex leader's response, when translated, was almost tentative. We manipulate energy patterns for consumption. But we observe that your energy patterns become more complex when entities cooperate. We are curious about creating rather than consuming. Creating rather than consuming. Zithiska realized that her day's impossible events had somehow convinced a species of energy predators to consider becoming energy engineers. Well, came Chen's voice, we'd love to have your help. Energy manipulation is exactly what we need for our quantum flux stabilizers. Would you like to hear about what we're trying to accomplish? As the collaboration expanded to include beings that had never worked together before, Zithiska found herself documenting events that challenged every assumption about species interaction, technological development, and the nature of civilization itself. Her people had built their society on the principle that advancement came through specialization and separation. Different species developed along different paths, each perfecting their own approaches to survival and technology. But these humans had somehow discovered that combining different approaches, even primitive ones, could produce results that surpassed any single species' achievements. Their ship was a testament to this philosophy, crude by consortium standards, but functional in ways that consortium technology could never match. More importantly, they had somehow convinced 6 other species that cooperation was more beneficial than competition. They had turned potential prey species into valued crew members, and now they had convinced the galaxy's apex predators to become interested in creation rather than destruction. Commander, Vex Prime reported, his voice filled with something approaching awe. The modifications we've made to both ships in the past few time units have improved efficiency ratings beyond anything in our databases. The human approach of trying stuff combined with our analytical methods has produced innovations that neither approach could achieve alone. Through the viewport, Zithiska watched Vrex energy beings carefully manipulating power flows while human engineers offered suggestions and consortium scientists provided theoretical frameworks. Species that should have been natural enemies were solving problems together with enthusiasm that bordered on joy. It was at this moment that Zithiska realized the true impact of offering kindness to a human. They hadn't just received help with their ship repairs. They had inadvertently triggered a revolution in how different species could relate to each other. And based on the communication requests now flooding in from across the galaxy as news of the collaboration spread, this revolution was just beginning. 3 galactic cycles later, Zethysca stood in the observation deck of what had once been her flagship, but was now something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly integrated vessel. The Eternal Wisdom had been transformed through collaboration between 17 different species into something that defied classification. Human improvisation had merged with consortium precision. Vrek's energy manipulation had combined with melodic collective harmonic engineering. Silicon-based crystalline growth technology had integrated with quantum-phase dimensional mechanics. The result was a ship that was somehow both more advanced and more chaotic than anything that had ever existed. "Commander," announced Lieutenant Torres, the human officer who had somehow become her second-in-command despite having no formal rank in the consortium hierarchy, "we're receiving priority communication from the Galactic Council. They are not happy." Zethysca's mandibles clicked in what humans had taught her to recognize as amusement. The Galactic Council represented the oldest and most traditional civilizations in known space. They had spent millennia perfecting their societies through rigid adherence to proven principles: species segregation, technological standardization, and hierarchical authority structures. The existence of her ship challenged every one of those principles. "What specifically are they not happy about today?" she asked. Torres consulted her display, which was itself a hybrid of human intuitive interfaces and consortium neural link technology. The usual complaints: unauthorized species integration, deviation from established protocols, and, oh, this is new, encouraging dangerous precedents in cosmic sociology. Through the vast windows of the observation deck, Zethysca could see the source of the Council's concern. What had started as a simple rescue mission had evolved into something that was reshaping the galaxy's understanding of civilization itself. Floating in formation around their ship were vessels from 43 different species, all following what was now being called the Human Protocol, the radical idea that species diversity was a strength rather than a liability. Some ships were still crude by traditional standards, but each one represented a breakthrough in cooperative engineering that surpassed anything the individual species had achieved alone. The Zarathian hive mind had collaborated with individualistic Terran psychologists to develop hybrid consciousness that maintained both collective efficiency and individual creativity. The result was artistic and scientific innovations that neither species could have imagined alone. The militaristic Krex Empire had partnered with the pacifist harmony seekers to create defensive technologies that could protect without causing permanent harm to attackers. Former warriors now served as guardians and protectors rather than conquerors. Most remarkably, 3 different species of traditional rivals had pooled their resources to establish the first truly neutral trade stations in galactic history. Spaces where any species could safely conduct business regardless of their political affiliations or biological requirements. "Commander," called out Crix Theta, the melodic collective member whose choir pod had expanded to include harmonic contributions from 12 other species. "The Council transmission includes formal demands for your immediate return to consortium space for disciplinary review." Zethysca felt her respiratory systems accelerate. She had known this day would come. Her actions had violated every principle of consortium policy. By any traditional measure, she was guilty of insubordination, protocol violation, and reckless endangerment of galactic stability. But as she looked around her observation deck, at humans working alongside beings they had only met cycles ago, at former predators and prey collaborating on solutions to problems neither could solve alone, at the impossible evidence that cooperation could indeed transcend every barrier that evolution and politics could create, she realized that traditional measures no longer seemed adequate. "What does Captain Chin recommend?" she asked. Torres grinned, an expression that Zethysca had learned to associate with human mischief. "The captain suggests we accept their invitation." "Accept their invitation to disciplinary review?" "Accept their invitation to demonstrate the effectiveness of cooperative principles," came Chin's voice as she entered the observation deck. Over the past cycles, the human captain had become not just an ally, but a friend, a concept that consortium culture struggled to define, but that humans seemed to understand instinctively. Chin gestured toward the display showing the Council's transmission. They want us to return to prove that what we're doing doesn't work. I say we show them exactly how well it does work. Zethyskar's eye stalks swiveled toward the human captain. You propose to bring this entire fleet to consortium space. I propose we accept their challenge and demonstrate that cooperation produces better results than segregation, Chen replied. Besides, you're not the only one facing official displeasure. Earth's colonial authority is equally unhappy with our unauthorized diplomacy initiatives. The colonial authority? Chen's expression grew more serious. Apparently, rescuing stranded aliens and forming cooperative alliances violates several dozen regulations about unauthorized contact with unknown species. They're demanding that I return to face charges of exceeding my authority. And you're willing to face those charges? Zethys, look around you. Chen gestured toward the observation windows, where the impossible fleet of cooperative vessels continued their work. 3 cycles ago, we were a failing transport ship with a handful of survivors. Now we're part of something that's proving cooperation can solve problems that individual species have struggled with for millennia. Through the communication system, other voices joined the conversation. Rex Prime, the energy being who had become their chief power systems coordinator, added his perspective. The Council fears what they cannot control, but their fear does not diminish the effectiveness of what we have accomplished. Commander Thorax of the former Krex military vessel Unyielding Fist offered his own insight. My warriors have learned more about true strength in these cycles working with former enemies than in centuries of conquest. If the authorities wish to challenge our methods, let them face the results of those methods. Even Zas9, the quantum phase being who existed partially in several dimensions simultaneously, contributed. In all probability streams I can observe, cooperation produces superior outcomes to competition. The traditional authorities operate from incomplete data. Zethyscar realized that she was listening to something unprecedented. A war council composed of species that had been natural enemies just cycles ago, now united in their commitment to proving that cooperation was superior to traditional hierarchy. Very well, she announced. We accept the council's invitation. But we go as a united fleet, not as individual vessels answering to separate authorities. The journey to consortium space took half a standard galactic cycle, and news of their approach preceded them. By the time they reached the outer markers of consortium territory, they were being tracked by monitoring stations from a dozen different civilizations. What they found waiting for them was the largest gathering of official vessels in recorded galactic history. The consortium had assembled a fleet of 60 traditional warships. The Galactic Council had contributed 40 vessels representing the most advanced military technology in known space. Even species that typically avoided galactic politics had sent observers. Facing them was the impossible fleet that had grown around the human concept of cooperation. Over 200 vessels representing 87 different species, many of which had been mortal enemies just cycles earlier. Incoming transmission from the Council flagship, Torres reported. They're demanding immediate surrender of all non-authorized personnel and vessels. Response. Chen asked. Zethyscar activated the general communication system that now connected their entire fleet. Council vessels, this is Commander Zethyscar speaking for the Cooperative Alliance. We have come in response to your invitation to demonstrate the effectiveness of our methods. We propose a formal comparison of capabilities. The response came from Admiral Korth Prime, the consortium's most decorated military commander. Commander Zethyscar, you will surrender your command and submit to immediate arrest for violation of consortium protocols. Your accompanying vessels will be impounded pending investigation. Respectfully, Admiral, we propose an alternative. Chen's voice joined the communication. A direct comparison of problem-solving capabilities. Present us with any challenge your traditional methods can address, and allow us to demonstrate our cooperative approaches. There was a long pause before Admiral Korth Prime responded. This is not a negotiation, Captain Chun. You will comply with lawful orders. Admiral, interjected a new voice, one that caused every display on both fleets to flicker with surprise. It was Director Voss Eternal, the legendary leader of the Galactic Council, who had not been seen in public for over a century. Director, Admiral Korth Prime responded with obvious deference. These vessels represent a clear threat to established order. Perhaps, Admiral, or perhaps they represent an opportunity to test whether our established order is as effective as we believe it to be. The ancient voice carried an authority that had shaped galactic civilization for millennia. I propose we accept their challenge. What followed was a negotiation that would be studied by political scientists for ages to come. The challenge was simple. Both fleets would be presented with the same crisis scenario, and their responses would be evaluated for effectiveness, efficiency, and long-term stability. The crisis was real, a collapsed star system on the edge of galactic civilization where three different species faced extinction due to the destruction of their home planets. Traditional rescue operations had failed because the species had incompatible life support requirements, hostile political relationships, and technological barriers that prevented cooperation. The consortium fleet approached the problem with characteristic efficiency: separate rescue operations for each species, temporary housing in segregated facilities, and eventual relocation to appropriate colony worlds where they could rebuild their separate societies. The Cooperative Alliance approached the same problem very differently. Torres, Chin called out, "Give me communication links with all three species simultaneously." "Captain, they don't share any common languages, and their translation protocols are incompatible." "Then, we'll fix that first," Chin replied with characteristic human optimism. "Crix Theta, can your choir pod create a harmonic bridge between their communication frequencies?" What followed was 6 standard time units of chaos that somehow resolved into unprecedented cooperation. The Melodic Collective created harmonic translation protocols. Vrex energy beings provided power for massive life support modifications. Human engineers collaborated with silicon-based crystalline architects to design habitation modules that could support multiple incompatible biologies simultaneously. But the real breakthrough came when the three species themselves began working together. Despite their historical antagonisms, they discovered that their different approaches to survival could complement each other. The aquatic flowing tide species provided biological expertise for life support systems. The crystalline earth shapers contributed materials technology for habitat construction. The energy-based light dancers offered power management solutions. Within 20 standard time units, what had been 3 separate refugee populations had become an integrated community working together to establish a new kind of colony, one designed from the beginning to support multiple species as equal partners. The consortium fleet had successfully relocated the refugees to separate facilities where they could maintain their distinct cultures while receiving necessary support. The Cooperative Alliance had helped the three species create something entirely new: the first truly multi-species society designed around the principle that diversity strengthened rather than weakened civilization. Results speak for themselves, Director Voss Eternal announced to both fleets. The traditional approach preserved 3 separate societies. The cooperative approach created one stronger society that incorporates the best of all 3. Admiral Korth Prime's response was immediate. "Director, the long-term stability of such integrated societies is unproven. Historical data indicates that multi-species cooperation inevitably leads to conflict and collapse." Historical data based on competitive rather than cooperative models, Chun interjected. "We're not trying to prove that cooperation is perfect. We're demonstrating that it's more effective than the alternatives we've tried so far." Director Voss Eternal's response would echo through galactic history. "Perhaps it is time to gather new historical data." The formal evaluation took another cycle, during which both approaches were tested against 7 different crisis scenarios. In each case, the Cooperative Alliance's results exceeded those of traditional methods. Not because their technology was more advanced, but because their diverse perspectives produced more creative and comprehensive solutions. More importantly, the solutions created by the Cooperative Alliance were self-sustaining. Rather than requiring ongoing support from external authorities, the integrated communities they established became sources of innovation and support for other struggling systems. By the time the evaluation concluded, the question was no longer whether cooperation worked better than segregation. The question was whether the galactic civilization was ready to fundamentally restructure itself around entirely new principles. Director Voss Eternal's final announcement would mark the beginning of what historians would call the Great Cooperation. The Galactic Council hereby recognizes the Cooperative Alliance as an equal governing body with authority to establish integrated colonies and pursue diplomatic relationships based on cooperative rather than competitive principles. As Zethiska stood on her observation deck, watching traditional warships begin to integrate cooperative species into their crews for the first time in galactic history. She realized that offering kindness to a human had indeed shattered everything she had expected. But what emerged from those shattered expectations was something far better than anything she could have imagined. 5 galactic cycles after the Great Cooperation began, Zethysca found herself facing the most challenging crisis of her long career. What had started as a revolutionary success was now threatening to tear apart the very fabric of galactic civilization. Not through failure, but through unprecedented success. Standing in the command center of New Harmony, the first truly integrated galactic capital, she studied the reports flooding in from across known space. The Cooperative Alliance had grown from a few dozen ships to over 10,000 worlds, but growth had brought problems that no one had anticipated. "Commander," reported Dr. Sarah Chun, the former ship captain who had somehow become the Alliance's chief diplomatic officer, "we're receiving formal complaints from 47 traditional governments about what they're calling cooperative infiltration." Zethysca's mandibles clicked in frustration. Infiltration? Their citizens are requesting to join cooperative communities in unprecedented numbers, Chen explained. The Zarathian Empire reported that 30% of their population has applied for transfer to Alliance worlds. The consortium is facing similar situations across their territory. Through the massive windows of the command center, Zethysca could see the evidence of what traditional governments feared. New Harmony was a city that shouldn't exist, a place where beings from over 200 different species lived and worked together in integrated communities that prospered beyond anything previously achieved. The architecture itself was revolutionary. Buildings that grew like living crystals, shaped by silicon-based organisms but powered by energy beings, and designed by collaborative teams that included humans, consortium engineers, and dozens of other species. Transportation systems that moved through dimensional space, maintained by quantum phase beings, but operating on principles that emerged from combining technologies no single species could have developed alone. Most disturbing to traditional authorities, the citizens seemed genuinely happy. Crime was virtually non-existent, not because of strict law enforcement, but because the cooperative structure made antisocial behavior both unnecessary and counterproductive. Innovation flourished as different perspectives combined to solve problems no single species could address. "What's the nature of their specific complaints?" Zethysca asked. Shin gestured to her display, which showed migration patterns across the galaxy. Traditional governments are experiencing what amounts to peaceful exodus. Their citizens aren't rebelling. They're just leaving for communities where they can participate as full partners rather than subjects. "Commander," interrupted Vex Prime, whose crystalline form now included integrated components from 17 different technological paradigms, "we're receiving an emergency transmission from Director Voss Eternal. Priority Alpha classification." The holographic display materialized to show the ancient leader of the Galactic Council, but his appearance had changed dramatically since their last communication. Where once he had projected the composed authority of millennia-old civilization, he now appeared haggard and uncertain. "Commander Zethysca," the director began, "the Council requires immediate consultation regarding what we are terming the stability crisis." "Director, what specific aspects of our cooperation are causing concern?" "All of them," came the blunt reply. "Your alliance's success is destabilizing every traditional government in known space. We're facing the complete collapse of established order." Zethysca exchanged glances with Chun, who stepped forward to address the transmission. "Director, with respect, we're not forcing anyone to join our communities. People are choosing to participate because cooperation provides better outcomes than traditional hierarchies." "Captain Chun, you misunderstand the scope of the problem," Director Voss Eternal replied. "Your cooperative communities are producing technological innovations at rates that make traditional research institutions obsolete. You're solving social problems that our governments have struggled with for millennia. You're creating abundance in systems that previously barely sustained life." "Those sound like positive developments," Chen observed. "They would be if they could be contained. But they cannot be contained." The director's image flickered with what appeared to be exhaustion. "Your success is forcing every government in the galaxy to either adapt to cooperative principles or watch their citizens abandon them for Alliance worlds." Zethysca felt her respiratory systems accelerate as she grasped the implications. "Director, are you saying that the traditional governments are facing revolution?" Not revolution, irrelevance. When citizens can compare societies based on actual results rather than historical tradition, they choose the societies that provide better lives. Your alliance has inadvertently triggered the peaceful dissolution of galactic civilization as we know it. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Zethascar realized that they had succeeded too well. By proving that cooperation worked better than competition, they had created a standard that traditional governments could not match without fundamentally altering their basic structures. Commander, came a new voice from the communication system. We're receiving multiple emergency transmissions from Alliance worlds. It appears we're facing coordinated attacks. The tactical display activated to show attacks occurring simultaneously across 17 different Alliance systems. But these weren't military attacks. They were what could only be described as deliberate sabotage operations designed to create humanitarian crises. Analysis, Zethascar ordered. Lieutenant Torres, now serving as intelligence coordinator, provided the assessment. The attacks are targeting life support infrastructure, food distribution networks, and communication systems. The goal appears to be creating catastrophic system failures that would force mass evacuations. Who's responsible? That's where it gets complicated, Commander. The attacks are being carried out by traditional government forces, but our intelligence indicates they're operating under direct orders from something called the Preservation Coalition. Chen stepped closer to the display. Préservation Coalition. A secret alliance of traditional governments who believe that the success of cooperative communities represents an existential threat to civilization itself, Torres explained. Their stated goal is to demonstrate that cooperation fails under pressure, thereby proving the necessity of traditional hierarchical authority. Zethascar studied the tactical situation with growing concern. The attacks were sophisticated, precisely targeted, and clearly designed to overwhelm the Alliance's ability to provide disaster relief. If successful, they would create humanitarian catastrophes that would force millions of beings to return to traditional government systems for survival. Commander, reported Crix Theta, whose harmonic analysis capabilities had become essential to Alliance intelligence operations. The pattern of attacks suggests they were planned by someone with intimate knowledge of our infrastructure systems. Infiltration? Possible. But more likely, they were planned by former Alliance members who returned to traditional systems and provided strategic information. Zethascar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the command center's environmental controls. The attacks weren't just military operations. They were being carried out by people who had experienced cooperative communities firsthand and had chosen to betray them. Why would Alliance members return to traditional systems? She asked. Chin's response was thoughtful and troubling, because cooperation isn't perfect, and it's not for everyone. Some people prefer the certainty of hierarchy to the responsibility of partnership. Some find a constant negotiation and consensus building exhausting. Some miss the simplicity of being told what to do rather than having to decide for themselves. And some, added Vex Prime, may have been sent as long-term infiltrators with the specific goal of learning our vulnerabilities. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. 17 systems under attack, millions of beings at risk, and limited resources to provide relief across such a wide area. Traditional military doctrine would require choosing which systems to save and which to sacrifice. But the Alliance didn't operate according to traditional military doctrine. Open communications to all Alliance worlds, Zethascar ordered. Emergency Cooperation Protocol. What followed was the largest volunteer mobilization in galactic history. Within standard time units, thousands of ships from hundreds of Alliance worlds were converging on the attack systems. But these weren't military vessels. They were ordinary citizens using whatever transportation they could find to help strangers they had never met. The quantum phase beings provided instantaneous transportation for emergency supplies. Vrex energy specialists offered power restoration services. Silicon-based engineers contributed structural repair capabilities. The melodic collective coordinated communication between rescue teams that didn't share common languages. But perhaps most importantly, humans contributed something that no other species had quite mastered: the absolute refusal to abandon anyone who needed help. Commander, reported Chun, monitoring the rescue operations, we're receiving real-time updates from all 17 attack sites. The sabotage operations were designed to overwhelm centralized relief efforts, but they didn't account for distributed voluntary response. On the displays, Zethysska watched the impossible sight of beings who had never met working together with efficiency that surpassed any military organization. Former enemies coordinating rescue efforts. Species with incompatible biologies finding ways to help each other survive. Ordinary citizens making extraordinary sacrifices for the welfare of strangers. The attacks are failing, Torres reported with obvious amazement. Every site that was supposed to become a humanitarian disaster is being successfully evacuated and repaired. But Zethysska realized that the real test was yet to come. The Preservation Coalition had underestimated the Alliance's ability to respond to crisis, but they would undoubtedly escalate their efforts. "Commander," announced the communication officer, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Korth Prime of the Consortium Fleet. He's requesting immediate conference." The holographic display showed the Admiral, but his appearance had changed dramatically since their last encounter. Instead of the confident authority of traditional military command, he appeared uncertain and conflicted. "Commander Zethysska," he began, "I am contacting you against direct orders from the Preservation Coalition. Admiral, my fleet has been ordered to support the sabotage operations by preventing Alliance relief efforts from reaching the attack systems. I am finding it difficult to justify following those orders." Zethysska's mandibles clicked in surprise. Admiral Korth Prime represented everything traditional about galactic military hierarchy. For him to question orders was unprecedented. "Admiral, what has changed your perspective?" "My granddaughter lives on Alliance world," he replied simply. "She sent me recordings of the rescue operations currently underway. I watched citizens of 40 different species risk their lives to save people they had never met, simply because those people needed help." He paused, seeming to struggle with concepts his training had never prepared him for. "Commander, in my centuries of military service, I have never witnessed such coordination, such dedication, such courage. These are not the characteristics of a weak or unstable society." "What are you proposing, Admiral?" "I am proposing that the Consortium fleet join the relief efforts rather than hinder them. My officers and crews have seen the same recordings I have. They understand that we face a choice between preserving a system that serves authority or supporting a system that serves people." Chun stepped forward. "Admiral, joining the Alliance means accepting that authority comes from consent rather than hierarchy. Are you prepared for that change?" Admiral Korth Prime's response would mark another turning point in galactic history. "Captain Chun, I have spent my career believing that order came from control. But I have just watched 17 systems maintain order through voluntary cooperation under conditions that would have caused complete chaos under traditional authority. The Consortium fleet hereby requests permission to participate in Alliance relief operations and to begin transition to cooperative command structure." As Zethysska authorized the Admiral's request, she realized that the Preservation Coalition's attacks had backfired catastrophically. Instead of proving that cooperation was weak, they had demonstrated that cooperation could respond to challenges that traditional systems could not match. More importantly, they had forced traditional leaders to choose between ideology and reality was proving far more compelling than ideology. "Commander," Torres reported, "we're receiving similar requests from fleet commanders across the galaxy. The relief operations are being broadcast on all communication frequencies, and traditional forces are refusing orders to interfere with humanitarian efforts." Through the windows of New Harmony, Zethysska watched ships from the former Consortium fleet arriving to join the integrated Alliance forces. Vessels that had been designed for war were being converted for rescue operations. Military hierarchies that had existed for millennia were reorganizing themselves around principles of voluntary cooperation. The Preservation Coalition's greatest weapon, the threat that cooperation would collapse under pressure, had become the Alliance's greatest victory. By proving that cooperation could handle any crisis better than traditional authority, they had triggered the peaceful transformation they had never intended to cause. But as Zethysska prepared for the next phase of galactic transformation, she wondered if they were ready for the responsibilities that came with such success. Leading a revolution was one thing. Managing the aftermath of that revolution was something entirely different. And based on the communication requests now flooding in from every corner of the galaxy, the aftermath was just beginning. 10 galactic cycles had passed since that moment when Commander Zethysska had offered help to a failing human ship, and Now she stood at the center of what historians were already calling the greatest peaceful transformation in galactic history. The old civilizations hadn't collapsed. They had evolved into something unprecedented and wonderful. The observation deck of New Harmony Station orbited a star that hadn't existed in nature. The combined efforts of 17 different species had artificially created a stable solar system designed specifically to support the galaxy's first truly integrated civilization. The star itself was maintained by Vrex energy beings working in harmony with quantum-phase dimensional engineers. The planets were shaped by silicon-based organisms collaborating with traditional terraforming technology. The entire system pulsed with life in frequencies that the melodic collective had learned to weave into a cosmic symphony of cooperation. "Commander," announced Dr. Sarah Chun, though her title had evolved far beyond anything traditional diplomacy could define, "we're receiving the final reports from the Transformation Council. The last holdout governments have requested integration assistance." Zethysca's mandibles clicked in patterns that had become her signature expression of amazed satisfaction. The Transformation Council represented over 3,000 species across 47 galaxy sectors, all working together to transition from competitive hierarchies to cooperative partnerships. What had begun as a rescue mission had become the foundation for galactic civilization's next evolutionary step. "What resistance remains?" she asked. "None, technically," Chin replied with a smile that had become famous across the galaxy. The Preservation Coalition dissolved 3 cycles ago, when their own citizens demanded the right to participate in cooperative communities. The last traditional governments aren't resisting the transformation. They're requesting help to manage it effectively. Through the vast windows, Zethysca could see the evidence of that transformation. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species moved through space in patterns that resembled a vast living organism rather than separate military or commercial fleets. Each vessel was unique, reflecting the individual culture and technology of its builders, but all were connected through communication networks that allowed instant coordination across impossible distances. More importantly, these ships weren't carrying conquering armies or trade delegations. They carried teachers, engineers, artists, and philosophers traveling between worlds to share knowledge and learn from others. The galaxy had become a vast classroom where every species was both student and teacher. "Status report on the integration projects?" Zethysca requested. Lieutenant Torres, whose analytical capabilities had made her indispensable to managing the complexity of galactic cooperation, activated the massive holographic display that filled the observation deck. "All major integration projects are exceeding projected outcomes." The display showed statistical data that would have been impossible to believe just cycles earlier. Cross-species collaboration had produced technological advances that individual species could never have achieved. Art forms that combined sensory experiences across radically different biologies were creating cultural renaissance throughout the galaxy. Scientific discoveries were occurring at rates that accelerated with each new species partnership. The Andromedid Contact Project has achieved successful communication with intelligence from outside our galaxy, Torres continued. "Turns out cooperative civilizations are more common in the universe than competitive ones. We're receiving integration requests from 47 extragalactic species." Extragalactic species. Zethysca realized that human kindness had somehow triggered a transformation that was spreading beyond their own galaxy to influence cosmic civilization itself. "What about the problems we were worried about?" she asked. "That's the fascinating part," Chin replied. "The theoretical problems with large-scale cooperation, resource conflicts, communication breakdowns, cultural incompatibilities, they're not occurring. Or rather, they're occurring but being resolved through methods we never imagined." Vex Prime materialized his holographic form nearby, his crystalline structure now incorporating elements from over 50 different technological paradigms. "Commander, our analysis indicates that cooperative systems become more stable as they grow larger, not less stable. Each new participant adds capabilities that strengthen the entire network." Explain. Traditional competitive systems required constant energy expenditure to maintain hierarchies and resolve conflicts. Cooperative systems redirect that energy toward innovation and problem-solving. The larger the cooperative network, the more diverse perspectives are available for addressing any challenge. Zethysca studied the data streams flowing across the displays. food distribution systems that had eliminated hunger across entire sectors, conflict resolution methods that had made war obsolete, scientific research programs that were solving problems none of the individual species had even recognized as solvable. But perhaps most remarkably, individual happiness and fulfillment indices had increased dramatically across all participating species. Beings who had spent their lives struggling for survival or status in competitive hierarchies were discovering the joy of contributing to something larger than themselves. "Commander," announced the communication officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Martinez requests conference regarding the humanity question." The humanity question. Zithiska felt her respiratory systems accelerate as she contemplated the most complex philosophical issue facing the new galactic civilization. Humans had inadvertently triggered the transformation that was reshaping cosmic society, but they remained the least technologically advanced species in the Alliance. Earth's governments had struggled to adapt to their species' sudden importance in galactic affairs. Humans found themselves in the unprecedented position of being simultaneously the most primitive and the most influential species in known space. "Put the transmission through." President Martinez appeared as a hologram, but her expression carried the weight of responsibility for representing a species that had accidentally become the philosophical foundation for galactic civilization. "Commander Zithiska, I'm contacting you regarding the proposal for human distribution." Human distribution. The controversial suggestion that humans should be dispersed throughout Alliance territories to serve as cooperation facilitators for species struggling with integration challenges. "President Martinez, what is Earth's position on this proposal?" "We're conflicted," the president replied honestly. "On one hand, we're honored that our natural inclination toward cooperation is valued by the galactic community. On the other hand, we're concerned about becoming a commodity rather than partners." Chun stepped forward. "President Martinez, the proposal isn't about using humans as tools. It's about recognizing that your species has something to teach the rest of us about building inclusive communities." "But that's exactly the problem, Captain Chun. We didn't consciously develop cooperation as a strategy. It's just how we naturally approach relationships. We're not teachers. We're just people doing what feels right." Zithiska realized that the conversation was touching on the deepest question facing the new galactic civilization: whether the transformation was sustainable if it depended on one species' instincts rather than universal principles that all species could master. "President Martinez," she said carefully, "our analysis indicates that human approaches to cooperation are indeed teachable. Other species have successfully learned and applied human techniques for building trust, resolving conflicts, and creating inclusive communities." "Which brings us to the real question," the president replied. "If other species can learn cooperation, why do we need humans specifically?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Vrex Prime, the energy being who had first encountered the humans as a potential food source, materialized as communication form. "President Martinez, you misunderstand your role in this transformation. Humans did not teach us cooperation. Humans demonstrated that cooperation was possible. Every other species in the galaxy believed that their competitive instincts were evolutionary necessities. You proved that alternative approaches could succeed. But now that we know cooperation works, don't we need to move beyond dependence on human examples?" "We are moving beyond dependence," Crix Theta added, their harmonic voice joining the conversation. "But we are not moving beyond appreciation. Human communities remain the most effective laboratories for developing new cooperation techniques, because you continue to innovate instinctively." Zithiska watched President Martinez process this information. The human leader was struggling with the same question that had challenged every species in the Alliance: how to maintain individual identity while participating in something larger than themselves. "President Martinez," Zithiska said, "perhaps the solution is not human distribution, but human partnership. Rather than sending humans to fix other species' problems, we could establish permanent research partnerships where humans and other species work together to develop new cooperation methods." Research partnerships? Centers for cooperative innovation on worlds throughout the Alliance. Each center would include human communities working alongside other species to explore new approaches to challenges that no individual species could solve alone. Chen's expression brightened with the kind of enthusiasm that had started the entire transformation. "That could work. Instead of humans being teachers or facilitators, we'd all be collaborative researchers exploring the frontiers of cooperation. President Martinez considered this proposal carefully. That preserves human autonomy while recognizing our contribution to galactic civilization. But what about the practical challenges? How do we prevent these research centers from becoming just another form of specialization and separation? The answer came from Torres, whose analytical mind had become expert at identifying potential problems before they developed. Rotation and integration. Every research center includes participants from multiple species, and individuals move between centers to share discoveries and prevent isolation. More importantly, added Vex Prime, the research focuses on developing cooperation methods that work for all species, not just replicating human instincts. As the conversation continued, Zethyscar realized they were designing something that had never existed before, a systematic approach to improving civilization itself. Instead of accepting that social and political structures were fixed by evolution and tradition, they were treating civilization as something that could be deliberately enhanced through research and experimentation. Commander, Torres announced, we're receiving confirmation from research institutions across the Alliance. Over 200 worlds have volunteered to host cooperative innovation centers. And human volunteers? Chen asked. Earth has received applications from over 1 million humans requesting assignment to research partnerships. Apparently, the idea of helping to invent new ways for different species to work together appeals to human curiosity. President Martinez smiled, and Zethyscar recognized the expression as typically human, delight at the prospect of solving interesting problems while helping others. Earth accepts the research partnership proposal, the president announced. We're honored to participate in the systematic improvement of galactic civilization. As the transmission ended, Zethyscar found herself contemplating the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a simple act of kindness, offering help to strangers who needed it. That kindness had revealed that cooperation could achieve what competition never could. And now that revelation was spreading beyond their galaxy to influence civilizations across the universe. Commander, Chun said quietly, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had followed standard protocols that day? Zethyscar's mandibles clicked in patterns that expressed philosophical contemplation. If I had followed protocols, 3 species would have been relocated to separate colony worlds where they could rebuild their traditional societies. The Vrex would have continued consuming life energy rather than creating it. The Galactic Council would still be managing conflicts between competitive civilizations. And billions of beings would still be struggling for survival and status instead of collaborating for mutual prosperity. But, most importantly, Zethyscar continued, we would never have discovered what was possible when different species genuinely supported each other's success. Through the observation deck windows, the artificial star system pulsed with the combined efforts of thousands of species working together not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Ships from worlds that had never imagined peaceful contact were sharing technologies and discoveries. Beings who had been natural enemies were raising their young in integrated communities where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. The transformation is accelerating, Torres reported, monitoring galactic communication networks. We're receiving contact requests from intelligent species in 17 different galaxies. Apparently, word is spreading that cooperative civilizations achieve better outcomes than competitive ones. 17 different galaxies. The kindness that had started with repairing a failing human ship was now influencing cosmic civilization across unprecedented scales. Commander, Chen asked, are we ready for that level of responsibility? Zethyscar considered the question carefully. They had accidentally triggered a transformation that was reshaping the universe's understanding of how intelligent species could relate to each other. The responsibility was indeed staggering. But, as she looked around the observation deck, at beings from hundreds of species working together with joy rather than obligation, at data streams showing innovations that were solving problems no individual species could address, at communication requests from civilizations that wanted to learn cooperation rather than practice conquest, she realized that readiness was not the right concept. Captain Chun, she said finally, we are not ready for this responsibility. But we are willing to accept it and learn how to fulfill it through cooperation with anyone else who shares our commitment to mutual prosperity. That sounds very human, Chen replied with a grin. Perhaps, Zithiska acknowledged. After 10 cycles of learning from your species, we have all become a little more human in our approach to impossible challenges. As they stood watching the impossible civilization they had helped create, Zithiska realized that offering kindness to a human had indeed shattered everything she expected. But what emerged from those shattered expectations was something far better than anything she could have imagined. A universe where kindness was not weakness, but the foundation of the greatest strength any civilization could possess. And, based on the contact requests still flooding in from across the cosmos, the story of that kindness was just beginning.